Hey, what's up 3Ders? 3D Theory here. In this video, we're going to talk about how to come up with an idea, design it, 3D model it, slice it, and 3D print it from start to finish. Now we're going to use the Creality CR-10 Smart to 3D print. So, with that being said, the best way to come up with an idea is to find a problem. So someone approached me not too long ago about their baby monitor, and they have a baby monitor. It's by Kids Need. It's a great baby monitor. And they asked me if I can create something on the 3D printer so that they can get a better vantage point of their baby's face. So I ended up creating this piece here where it can kind of just hang on that makeshift screw like that, and I can put it here on the crib, and it has a great vantage point to see the baby's face. And in this case, we got baby Yoda. But the issue is that on the baby monitor, the baby always comes up sideways. So they would need to have the screen flipped like this, and they want to set it down flipped like this so they can see the baby flipped upright. So they asked if I can create a case that has a similar stand function like this, but this only stands it sideways. And that's the idea we're gonna go with today. We're gonna flip it upright and figure out some sort of case or stand that we can create where they can just place it and do the things they need to do while seeing their baby upright. In this case again, baby Yoda. All right, so the first thing we're gonna wanna do here is take pictures of this device in all of its angles. So we're gonna wanna take one head on, sideways, the back, top, bottom, and both sides here. And the reason for this is that we're gonna wanna have a 3D representation of this device so that we can create the case or stand we're gonna be using for it in the computer. So I'm gonna go ahead and use my phone and take some pictures here. All right, what's up everybody? So we're here on the computer and I wanna come up with some ideas for that screen and how we're gonna hold it. So as I was thinking, either we're gonna create a case or we're gonna create a stand. I thought to myself, if we're gonna create a stand, I want it to be in like the baby design world. So I thought to myself, maybe I can do a pacifier or maybe a baby bottle. And I like the idea of having a baby bottle be the stand that we may create. I also thought maybe we can stay in the design language of the screen that we already have, which is kind of like a square with really rounded edges. And in terms of a case, I thought to myself, maybe like a phone case. So if this is the baby monitor here with that little antenna, we'd need to create something where it can stand up vertically. So with all that in mind, let's start off with the design language idea that I had. So I thought to myself, okay, let's design this in the same design language as the screen. So I'm gonna draw out the screen again in like a 45-degree angle or thereabout. Then maybe I can create a separate piece that is similar in its shape language, in its silhouette, but I can have some sort of slot here where we can then place the screen. So it'd probably be sunken in about here. And this would just go back like that, and it would hold up the screen like this. But then I thought to myself, this may look a little boring. What if I want something that looks a little bit more fun for them? Then I thought to myself, okay, we have the baby bottle idea. How can I make this work? I thought maybe if I can chop this part off, make it just flat, I can then go ahead and lay this down and it would have a cool little design aesthetic to it. So then I would, again, just cut out a piece like this. And then you could simply place the device here and you can just watch it upright. Then I thought to myself, there are two pieces that you have to carry around now. You have the device and you have the stand. And seeing as how the device itself, the screen on the back, has a stand that's already built in, I thought to myself, you know what? It'd probably be better if I were to have a stand that's attached to the device. So in that case, I thought to myself, let's create a phone case type of design that has a somehow built-in stand where you can stand it upright. So between the three ideas, I thought to myself, so I don't want two pieces. This is the screen and this is the stand. Also, number two has a screen and a stand. With that idea, I can simply rule idea one and idea two out and go with idea number three. But before we go and start using calipers to get the measurements, I actually want to make sure I have the idea fleshed out over here. As I was sitting here thinking, I thought to myself, why don't I just do it like this. Here's the screen with the antenna right here. I can then build a case that's form-fitting, but also has an opening for the antenna, and likewise there's a charging port. And there can be two flaps. One flap that comes out this way, and another flap that comes out this way. So one would need to be in a little deeper, and this one will be out a little further. So in essence, if we're looking at the back here, here's the antenna again. We have a casing that's form-fitting. Then we have a piece that comes out, and we can say that this is where it can pivot from. So you would pull from here and it would swing open, and underneath that we would have another one with a pivot on the opposing side. So then you can get it from here and open it out. And so what that would do, that would give you the ability to open the top flap while having the bottom flap be a support. And likewise, if you were to need to flip the screen so that the antenna portion's on the top, you can likewise flip the opposing end and use the smaller end to hold it up. Now there's something to be said about this, that it's very rare that you can create and design a product and have it right the very first time around. You're gonna do what is called prototyping. And prototyping is an iterative process, which means you're gonna have to create a version 1 and find out its flaws, fix them, then create a version 2, find out its flaws and fix them, then create a version 3, until you have a final prototype. And again, it's rare to see a design work the very first time around. But with that being said, with this idea in mind, we're gonna try to do this the first time around and have it ready the very first time around. And to do this, we're gonna need to keep in mind tolerance, which is how well something fits into another piece. We're gonna have to keep in mind correct measurements. And during the slicing phase in Creality Slicer, we're gonna have to keep in mind how much infill we're gonna have for the strength and durability of the product. All right guys, so now let's head over to those calipers and the screen and get those measurements. All right guys, so we're here with the screen and the trusty calipers. If you guys don't have calipers and you want to get into designing your own products, I suggest getting some digital calipers where it gives you millimeters and inches and whatever else units you need. And it simply, as you open it, it tells you how many inches or millimeters it is. This thing is super awesome, especially if you're not handy with a ruler like me. All right guys, so let's get this thing measured out. So, got my pencil, got my Post-its. I'm gonna open this up and we're gonna get a first measurement here. First measurement reads 3.23 inches. So we're gonna write from top to bottom, 3.23 inches front, and there you have it. Then we're gonna wanna get from left to right. All right, from left to right, we have 4.548 inches. We're gonna write 4.548 inches. And this is the front again. And remember, we're going from left to right. And again, these are personal notes. This is how I do them, and you can do them your own way. Then we're gonna wanna get thickness. So we're gonna grab that, go as deep as possible, and get the thickness, which is 0.724 inches. And I think that's all the measurements I'm gonna wanna get for right now. I'm gonna keep the calipers handy next to me. So as I 3D model, I can just grab the screen and use the calipers and check out any measurements I'd like to see. So let's jump on back into the computer, and I use Maya as my designing software. Other people can use AutoCAD, Fusion 360, and so on, maybe even Blender. Whatever your software of choice is, you can more or less pull off the same things. So let's jump back into the computer. I'll see you there. All right guys, we're here with a brand new scene in Maya, and I'm just gonna show you the reference images I took. So we got one of the front, one of the side, back, other side, bottom, and top. So the first thing I'm gonna wanna do is check my units here in Maya. So I'm gonna go here to the running man with the gear next to it, click settings. Over here, I'm gonna choose inches. Now, Maya doesn't use real world inches. It uses what I like to call Maya inches. So to get an equivalent unit, as you would see in Cura, you would need to multiply all the numbers by 10. And I'll show you how we're gonna do that. So let's go ahead and create a cube. And so this is a 1-inch cube in all sides, but not in real world scale, in Maya inches scale. So to just get that right, we're gonna grab all the scale, X, Y, and Z, and we're just gonna multiply it by 10 And this now is real world a 1-inch cube. And now we can go into the inputs over here and we could now adjust the sizes to the measurements we got from our calipers. So we know that from top to bottom, it's 3.23 inches. Before we input those measurements, we're gonna go over to the front screen. Now we're here in the front screen. So for the height, we're gonna put 3.23 inches. And from left to right, which is width, we've got 4.55 inches. And the depth is 0.73 inches. So now that we have these measurements, I'm gonna bring in that reference image that I have. So now that we're here in the front orthographic, I'm gonna go ahead and import the image and simply locate the file. And I've imported that in now. I'm gonna go ahead and click the see-through button, turn off the grid, and I'm just gonna scale this to the correct measurements that we have now here in Maya. And we're gonna do our best trying to line this up. All right, that's lined up really well. I'm just gonna throw this into a layer so that I can't touch it anymore. Now that I know that this is lined up, I'm gonna get the bevels in. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm actually gonna hide the image plane here. I'm gonna go ahead and click the 4 corners here, and I'm gonna click Shift, right mouse button, bevel edge. And as you can see here, we got a nice bevel going on. So I'm gonna slow down the intensity of how much you can extend this, and I'm gonna start adding segments. All right, I added 4 segments there. That's looking pretty good. Then to match the shape of this here, I'm gonna adjust the bevels, and that's looking about right. I'm gonna work on one side here. Then I'm gonna go ahead and add an edge here in the middle, make sure it's going all around, and one on the top here, so that we can get some good modeling in here and match the actual device. All right, that's looking pretty good. And I'm only gonna do one segment here, and I'll show you, so you don't have to do double the work. Now we're just gonna go over to duplicate special, and I'm gonna scale it in the X. By the way, this is X, this is Y, and this is Z. So I'm gonna scale this in the X. Now we got 2 sides here. And likewise, I'm gonna combine these by going Mesh, Combine. I'm gonna bring that pivot back down to the center. I'm gonna reset it. And now I'm gonna do it in Y, because up and down is Y in Maya, as opposed to in 3D printer world, it's Z for up and down. And now we've got the workings of a screen. And just so you know, these are not connected, as you can tell by the highlighted outlines. So I'm gonna connect these 2 pieces, because there's 2 pieces now. I'm gonna connect these 2 together, actually combine them. Then I'm gonna go and select the verts, Shift right mouse button, merge vertices. And I'm using a very low threshold, and those are now combined to make the screen. And likewise, I'm gonna go ahead and add the antenna now. And to do that, I'm simply gonna bring in another piece of geometry, and I'm gonna do it by eye. This is a cube that can turn into a spherical shape by smoothing it. So now that we have this, I'm just gonna simply click Mesh, Smooth. I'm gonna do 2 iterations of that smooth. I'm gonna delete the bottom half of that, bring this up. That's looking pretty good. I'm gonna scale this and extrude it down and scale that up so that we have the makings of an antenna. And what I realize is that it's not a perfect circle, so I'm gonna go ahead and use my calipers and get the measurements of the thickness really quick. And the topmost part of it measures out to be 0.265 inches. And to get 0.265 inches, I'm gonna create another cube, multiply that by 10, and do 0.265 inches. Then I can bring that cube up, go into my top view, bring it on over. Now I'm gonna select the vertices up top. And again, using soft selection, which I forgot to mention before, you click B and it creates soft selection so you can affect the other parts of your model as well. Using soft selection, I can now scale this to where I think it needs to be, which is in line with this cube. I'm matching that line up with this line as best as possible. All right, that's nice and lined up. This is now my measuring cube. So I'm gonna keep this here as my measuring cube. Okay, all right, we have ourselves so far a really close making of what that screen is gonna be. Now we're gonna wanna work on the profile here. So I'm gonna go over to my side view and I'm gonna import my side view. I'm just gonna go ahead and scale that up and rotate it ever so slightly and push that in. And right here, we got a line that's going on. So I'm gonna bring in the multi-cut tool and add that hard edge there, which more or less is right in the middle. So we got a nice curve going on here. And to get that in, I'm just gonna model that in by hand. So I'm gonna add 3 subdivisions there. I'm gonna scale down. Continue scaling down. Deselect these vertices as well. Continue scaling down. And a little bit more. And we got the makings of a screen. Okay, now the reason why we created this is to just have a placeholder. As a matter of fact, if we want to go a step further and refine this shape so it's not so blocky, we can. I'm going to go ahead and select these and do Edit Edge Flow. And now it's creating a nice, elegant curve there. And likewise, we can do the same thing going this way. And I'm not worried about topology here. I just want to get a nice, clean curve. In this case, we're going to do it by hand. There you go. All right, now that we created a fairly accurate screen here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this, isolate it. I'm going to take out this front area for the screen because I know that that part is going to be used for the screen. And in this case, I'd like to have some clean topology. So I'm going to go ahead and connect all these together. All right, so that when we smooth preview it by clicking the number 3, it creates a nice smooth preview of it. From here, I'm going to want to extrude this out. And this is where we want to keep tolerance in mind. So I'm going to go ahead and click on it, Shift, right click, Extrude. And I'm simply going to adjust the thickness here, which is about a 0.15 inch thickness here. I'm going to go ahead and delete the inner portion and just have an outer shell like this with a pretty thick distance there. And why did I do this? I did this because I'm going to want to now create the thickness of this shell and with a gap in between where the screen's going to go in to the case. So now that I have that shell there, I'm going to go ahead and extrude it again. I'm going to expand the thickness inward and I'm going to give it a pretty big gap there. And that gap, by the way, is tolerance. So that's a pretty big gap. And I just want to make sure that I've accounted for any sort of error that I may have done in my measurements, because I would like to have this done first time around. Okay, that's looking good to me. All right, and I'm gonna actually just change the color here for my own visual distinction. Okay, and I'm also gonna wanna make a hole for this antenna. And to do that, I'm gonna add another edge loop here. I'm gonna just go ahead and delete these faces. Now with that done, I'm gonna bridge these gaps here. All right, now that we got that hole patched up, I also want to create a hole for the power port. And to do that, I'm just gonna raise this edge loop so that it matches perfectly. And we have ample room there. And now that we have that in mind, I'm just gonna grab these two faces and delete them. And likewise, the two faces on the inner side. And that looks like it's pretty close, but I think I'm gonna also delete these faces here. And just so it looks a little better, I'm gonna bring this up. And we have a nice big hole to bring in the power cord there. And likewise, I'm just gonna bridge these gaps. And we have the makings of a case so far. We're almost there. We would like to create some clips so that the screen can stay in. And to do that, I'm gonna go to the bottom and grab these faces here and extrude them out, make them straight. I'm gonna duplicate the case here. And all I want are these two faces. So I'm gonna extract those faces and delete the rest of that extra case. All right, we got those two extra faces there. And the reason why I kept those is because I want to create some separate pieces here that can be extended upward like this to keep the screen in place. As a matter of fact, I think these are kind of large and we don't need them that large. And I want them to be a perfect cube. So I'm gonna straighten out all the edges here. Then we'll just scale them in like that. As a matter of fact, I could delete the second one. And after I scale these in, I'm simply just gonna extrude it out so that we have something that holds the screen in. And I have these little screws that I can use to screw this in and keep it in place. Ideally, it would be great to make a screw hole, but in this case, I'm just gonna leave it as a cube and I'm just gonna duplicate this over to the other side, okay? So that when it's sitting upright, it's being held in. All right, now that we have these secured in place, I can now create the back pieces here. These back pieces are gonna hold up the screen. And so what I'm gonna wanna do is create a cube and expand the cube so that it can hold up the case. And I think that's a good thickness. And I'm gonna make this a little shorter because I'm gonna create another one where it is just a little longer and they can sit right on top of each other like that. All right, and to create the pivoting areas, I'm gonna have to create a point where they meet and about the same size. And this is gonna wanna meet that top one there, okay? This is where the hinge is gonna be. So we're gonna wanna make sure that this is nice and supportive. I'm gonna extend this out just a little bit, likewise with this one, and bring this a little closer. And I'm just gonna duplicate special in the Y-axis so that this has a pivot. And we're gonna do the same thing with the other side now, except we're gonna have it for the inner flap there. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and combine these. Mesh combine. And I'm gonna duplicate it over to the other side in the X-axis. Only this time I'm gonna bring this in a little bit more so it matches the bottom flap. Let's just make sure we're not going through the geometry. Okay, we're looking good. So now we're gonna wanna create a catching point. So this will catch here. Like that. And likewise, we're going to want to create a catching point for the other side. And we can only create so much of a lip there. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring this down a little bit so that that lip is bigger and can catch. All right. So we just got to make this work now by creating cylinders in there that can be easily put in. And these are going to create the turning motions, but I feel like this would be way too thin. Likewise, I'm going to want to probably make this a little thicker so that this has some walls that it can adhere to, so the walls don't just fall apart because of the 3D print being so thin. And so these are all things you want to take into consideration as you're building and designing. So now that we have everything we need here, because I know I want these cylinders to be about this big, I'm gonna have to duplicate it and give it some tolerance so when I create the hole for these, it can fit in. And depending on how tight I want it to be, I think I'm gonna make it kind of tight here, because I could always sand down that cylinder on the inside to make it thinner and fit in there. But if it's too loose, then they'll just be flapping open and closed all the time. And I want there to be some friction there. So I just went ahead and duplicated that larger cylinder and brought it over here. What I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna go ahead and extend these through to the other side. And I'm just gonna stop them right where those, let's call them hinges, are. So they're right where they need to be, and I can glue them in place as needed. Now I'm gonna create another set of these because I'm gonna have to bevel twice. I'm gonna combine these, and I'll show you what I mean by that. And I'm just gonna go ahead and extend these out. And the first thing I'm going to want to bevel are these guys here. So I'm going to go ahead and do a difference function. And as you can tell here now, there are holes here that are going to be able to hold in these cylinders that are going to allow it to turn in place. But we don't have any holes in here. So likewise, I'm going to combine these and also combine these. I'm going to extend these down, and we're going to run a Boolean function again. Mesh, Boolean difference. Now we're gonna have holes here so that those cylinders can go through. Just for my own personal taste, I'm gonna wanna bevel these so they're not so sharp. Just gonna increase those segments there. All right, now they're looking nice and beveled. And we have the makings of a stand for this screen here. And the last thing I'm gonna wanna do is make this subdividable. All right, and to bevel this one, I'm gonna select all the hard edges like I did here. There's some extraneous selections, so I'm gonna deselect these. All right, now that I have all the edges I wanna bevel selected, I'm gonna go ahead and run the bevel function. In this case, I'm gonna turn chamfer off because I'm gonna wanna smooth this so that it comes out really smooth in Creality Slicer. All right, so now that we have those edges nicely beveled, we can go ahead and smooth this so that it looks really nice and clean. Mesh, smooth, and I'm gonna run it twice to make sure it's extra smooth. Oh, there's one thing I forgot to do. I forgot to Boolean these in, and that's super important. So I'm gonna go ahead and Boolean these into this piece here. I'm gonna grab these two, mesh, Booleans, and we're gonna do a union this time, and they combine really nicely. So this is gonna print out as one piece like this. And there's one thing I forgot to mention. I usually like to work in all quads, but triangles are also acceptable, but definitely not n-gons. And we got a lot of n-gons here. So I would like to resolve the n-gons before I bring them into Creality Slicer. And the way I do that is I go to Select, Use Constraints. I click on Next Selection. Then I go to Face Mode and select N-sided here. So the next thing you select is everything that has n-gons. So from there, I just click my space bar, Mesh, Triangulate. So all these are now triangulated, and Creality Slicer should read them just fine. All right, and we're ready to start exporting out so we can get this sliced in Creality Slicer. So I'm gonna go ahead and select one by one and export out my OBJs. All right, I went ahead and I exported out all the OBJs, no materials needed by the way, if you're familiar with exporting out OBJs. And now let's jump into Creality Slicer. All right, now that we're here in Creality Slicer, we're gonna be using the CR-10 Smart here. So I'm gonna go ahead and drop that main piece in there. All right, now that we brought this in, I'm gonna find the best angle to slice this at, where it uses the least amount of supports and is strong. All right, funny enough, this is the best angle. It prints at 8 hours and 12 minutes, which is pretty quick if you ask me. And we're using really simple settings here. We're gonna be using a skirt, got 5% support density, and the rest of it is just your same settings as usual. So I'm gonna save that to file. All right, now that that's saved out, I'm gonna do the same thing for the rest of them, and I'll see you at the Creality CR-10 Smart.
All right, guys, we got the print finished here on the Creality CR-10 Smart. It's the moment of truth. Let's get this thing off the build plate. All right, that's looking good. I'm gonna go ahead and take out the supports from the inside, and I'll meet you back here with the screen so we can test fit it. All right, guys, moment of truth. So we got the screen here, and we have the case that I created for it, and it fits perfectly. Only issue that I found was that the charging port was on the side of the antenna. So there's a hole here for no reason, but that's okay. We'll continue with this, and if I want to, I'll make a second iteration later with the charging port sticking out of the hole there. Other than that, it fits really nicely. And we're waiting, and we're gonna start printing out the rest of the pieces now. All right, so we got everything I need here to build this case for the screen. We got some very fast super glue here, a couple of screws, the back flaps, the two holders, as well as those pins that are gonna go in here. So I'm just gonna get to assembling this. All right, the pin went through pretty good. Now before I set it all the way in, I'm gonna get some super glue in there. All right, we got one flap in there. Now we're gonna put in the other flap. All right, before I stick it through the other hole, again, I'm gonna put some glue. Then I'm just gonna stick it right through. Okay, we got our flaps. There's one thing I overlooked, and this is what I was talking about with the prototype face. This can't open if it's completely underneath, so I'm gonna have to just place it in like this, and then we'll see if it closes upon itself. All right, so that doesn't close because it is too long, so I'm gonna have to make another iteration. And like we said in the beginning, no matter how hard you try, there's always gonna be some sort of iteration you're gonna have to make. But the concept seems to work as long as I shorten this a little bit. So it's gonna have to just stick out for the time being, and we're just gonna go ahead and finish this. And all right, guys, as you can see, the concept is working. So that will stand up, as well as the other side. That will stand up. So the concept itself is working. So we're just gonna go ahead and continue here. And I do have to shorten this and bring this hole onto the other side. So that'll be another iteration that I'll do. So we have those two flaps, and that's pretty much all we have left. I need to drill some holes to get the screws started, and I got these tiny little screws here that we're gonna be using. All right, we got the holes started, so that should be easy to screw in there. All right, just to make sure I got a good grip on it, I'm gonna use my pliers here. And likewise, I'm gonna drill some holes here, both there and there, so that they can easily fit right in. All right, I'm gonna get the screw started on these little holders here. Okay, those are started, and I'm gonna go ahead and place them on the pre-drilled area, so we can turn them as needed and tighten them, so it can fit right in. And you can just hold that in place like that. There you have it. And so we're just gonna stick the device in and go ahead and turn these. And they self-tighten as you turn. And there you have it. You have a self-standing, on both sides, screen holder. And as you need it, you can turn these and take it out. As a matter of fact, you could even place it down like that. So there you have it, guys. There are a couple of fixes I need to do, which is moving this hole here onto the other side so you can charge it. And I need to make this a little shorter so that it can close in on itself, and likewise this on top. Other than that, this is ready to go. All right, what's up, guys? So we went ahead and we did a second iteration of this. I made sure I put the hole for the power
on the correct side this time. And I made holes here for the screws, as well as I put the holes on the back piece here so it screws in a lot easier and it doesn't break or anything like that. And you easily can just turn these knobs and take it out whenever you want to for whatever reason. But you wouldn't really need to because I created the power hole here. And this thing has a microphone, and it's gonna be kind of hard to see on here, but right there is how you can communicate from the camera to the screen device. And I left room for that as well. Used to have a little dot there, and it holds it in place very securely. This fits. I actually made a clip so you can unclip it and clip it back in, and it won't come out, but you can just unclip it, bring this down, and stand it up. And then let's say the baby is facing the opposite way. You can do the same thing, flip it the other way, and stand it up that way. And that works. All right, guys. Well, this wraps it up for this video. I hope you enjoyed the process of making this case. If you like this video, please go ahead and subscribe. Click that notification bell to get notified when I release new videos. And click that like button if you like this video. Until next time, guys, peace, love, and joy.